Hi, guys, and welcome back to the Female Fitness Podcast. In today's episode, I'm going to talk all about overcoming overeating, and I am going to structure today's podcast by talking about six common reasons why we overeat, or six behaviors that people often engage in that exacerbate overeating, and how you might go about tackling those things. Overeating is so common. People will often get binge eating and overeating confused. Um, but a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about today will exacerbate both overeating and binge eating. So if you're struggling with either of those two things, addressing these six areas will help you overcome that. And these are some of the most common habits or mindsets or behaviors that people engage in that think are helping them, but are actually causing a lot more issues than they realize. So, first thing, a lot of people neglect to consider enjoyment when it comes to nutrition, especially when they're chasing health and fitness goals and they start to pay attention to the kind of behaviors that will support them in achieving those goals, or they start to set themselves or work with a coach who sets them numerical targets or structure-based targets. We can often completely neglect to consider enjoyment. But actually, enjoyment is so important if we wish to see long-term success and if we wish to be the healthiest versions of ourselves as well. It's so important when it comes to long-term success because if we don't enjoy the process in our lives to some extent, or our clients don't enjoy the process and our lives through the journey of working to achieve their goals, they're probably going to get to a point where they feel they cannot any longer sustain their efforts. They feel like that process has an end date. And so then the behaviors that are supportive of them achieving their goals fall by the wayside. Whereas if we create as much enjoyment as possible, and nutrition is a part of that, if we make sure ourselves and our clients are consuming meals that we actually like, we're more likely to be able to sustain our efforts and see long-term success with our goals. Lack of consideration for enjoyment can also heavily exacerbate issues like overeating or binge eating because it leads to us feeling very unsatisfied after our meals. And that in itself can increase our drive to eat and lead to us, for example, if we say we went out to a restaurant and we forced ourselves to order something that we believed was the healthiest or lowest calorie option on the menu, but we didn't actually enjoy that meal, we might then be more prone to coming home and raiding the kitchen cupboards and overeating. And so to support our health and to support our quality of life and progress with our fitness goals, we would have been much better off ordering something that we would have actually enjoyed. We would have therefore felt more psychologically satisfied after the meal, and we would be less likely to engage in overeating following that. So that's an example of that point put into practice. And another thing that I see, especially from people who've come from, backgrounds of dieting, following macros and things like that, it can be very easy to get stuck in this mindset of making every meal as high volume as possible to avoid hunger. But again, that is something that neglects to take into account psychological satisfaction from food and can actually increase, therefore, our likelihood of overeating. So again, if you're someone who's constantly kind of packing every single meal full of salad or berries, for example, and eating the same things on a daily basis, maybe you could consider changing that up a little bit and making a bit of room for enjoyment. That absolutely has its place to consider eating lots of fruit and veg, and higher volume foods can be really beneficial for managing our appetite, but we also need to strike a balance between considering psychological satisfaction and enjoyment of food and also making our meals filling and satiating. So sometimes just letting yourself have the thing that you actually want is far more beneficial than trying to be perfect or optimal on paper. And that's a really important point to consider with both yourself and your clients. Another common mistake I see people make is trying to save calories for the end of the day to try and avoid overeating, to try and kind of keep their intake quite minimal so they know that they've got room to enjoy more food at the end of the day. But the number of times I've seen clients try to do this and it lead to them actually just overeating in the evening or feeling incredibly uncomfortably full after their evening meal because they've packed so much into it is ridiculous. And in a lot of cases, what it can lead to is if you're not eating enough earlier in the day, if you're trying to save calories for your evening, you're then going into your evening meal feeling really physically hungry, feeling very psychologically food focused, think like not being able to stop thinking about that evening meal or the dessert that you're going to have after it and that kind of thing. And then again, that exacerbates any overeating. It leads to an increased likelihood of overeating because when our hunger is so high and our food focus is so high, it's very hard to be present and mindful whilst we're eating. It's very hard to slow our eating down because we're so hungry and we want to wolf our food down. And therefore, like I said, an increased likelihood of overeating. So often trying to save calories for the evening, trying to limit your intake earlier in the day is so counterproductive, and you would be much better off eating more substantial meals throughout the day. And this the same thing applies for if you think about yourself or clients, if you save calories through the week for your weekend, the same thing applies there. A lot of times that just leads to an increased likelihood of overeating over the weekend. It exacerbates this cycle of overeating followed by restriction, which is very, very hard to break free from. And so you would be so much better off just consistently providing your body with the fuel that it needs. Because if you do that, if you eat substantial meals earlier in the day, or you keep your intake normal throughout the week in the run up to the weekend, you'll be more likely to enter the weekend or that evening meal feeling more regulated, with your hunger levels lower, your food focus lower. You're more likely to be able to be present and mindful and in control with your decisions and behaviors around food. And you're more likely to actually end up eating less over the course of the day or the course of the week due to being able to be present and mindful and being able to eat normally rather than ending up overeating. And I understand that, if you're somebody that's struggling with overeating at the moment, it can feel very daunting to start to eat more earlier in the day because you'll think, oh gosh, but what if I overeat again this evening? And then I've eaten more earlier in the day and then I overeat again and then my intake's really large. But what you need to recognize is that, if nothing changes, nothing changes. Like if you don't change your approach, you will stay stuck in the cycle that you're stuck in. So you need to lean into the discomfort of trying a different approach first and foremost, and try to challenge your thoughts and your fears with the logic of knowing what I've just spoken through, that if you give your body and yourself substantial meals throughout the day, you will feel more regulated, you will feel more stable, you will feel more in control around food, you'll be less likely to overeat. And this might not happen straight away, but it will happen over time. And if you can lean into the discomfort of challenging yourself to have slightly more substantial meals, and you can take a moment to notice how you feel in response to that going into your evening meal or going into the weekend, and you notice that hunger levels are lower, if you notice that you feel more regulated and in control and at peace around food, that will help you feel more and more comfortable around eating more substantial meals through the day or through the week as time goes on, because you've got proof to yourself that it's actually working. It's having the desired effect, and it's therefore going to decrease your likelihood of overeating. So if you can push yourself and lean into the discomfort, even if it's not, drastically increasing your intake, even if it's just making your meals a little bit more balanced, a little bit more substantial initially, and then you see some positives of that, you're like, actually, I do feel a little bit better. My hunger levels are a little bit more stable. I don't feel quite as food focused. That might help you then continue to push that and take that next step of making them that little bit more substantial and that little bit more balanced. And then you will get to a point where eventually your intake stabilizes, you feel really good, and you've got the proof that you need to keep up the good work with those positive behaviors of providing your body with the fuel that it needs consistently throughout the day and throughout the week, rather than trying to save calories for your evening or save calories for the weekend. Because doing that is keeping you stuck in this cycle of overeating followed by restriction. This is how you break that cycle. Number three, not taking a moment to question whether the hunger that you're experiencing is physical or psychological. So there are different reasons we will feel hungry, and that's not always because of a physical need for food. And it can be really beneficial just to take a pause and question where the urge to eat is coming from and whether it is physical or whether it's psychological. And it's absolutely okay to eat for comfort, for example, at times. But what we want to do is we want to make conscious and intentional decisions around that. And we want it to be a decision we're making from a place of nourishment and self-respect rather than an impulsive reaction to feeling a certain way. So what we don't want to do is feel, say, really emotional, whether that be um, because we're lonely or we've had something really bad happen and we're upset about it, or we're angry, whatever it is, we don't want to act response like we don't want to respond impulsively in the moment and turn to food for comfort or numbing without taking a pause and making a decision to do that. What we do want to do is add that pause in, question where the urge to eat is coming from, and then make an educated decision on what the right thing to do is in that scenario. An example of where it might actually be a productive thing to do to allow ourselves to eat for comfort, and an example of where it might be a nourishing scenario is if we've had something, say, really bad happen in our lives and we have that urge to eat for comfort, we might make a conscious decision to have a really comforting meal that evening, like I don't know, I would find a lasagna really comforting. So say a lasagna. And you've sat down, you've eaten it mindfully, you've taken your time with it, you've really enjoyed it, you feel satisfied afterwards, and alongside that, you've made space to just sit with how you feel. An example of where comfort eating would be a much more negative experience is if, say, you feel really emotional because you've had something bad happen, same kind of situation, and you come home from work, you get straight into the kitchen cupboards, you're eating out of the packets, you're eating really quickly. It's not a nourishing experience. You're not really enjoying it. You're literally just doing it to numb out how you feel or for comfort in a reactive state. That's not going to leave you feeling good. Whereas if you've made a conscious decision, you've taken a pause, you recognize I don't feel too great right now, I want a really comforting meal, and you've made that decision from a place of nourishment, that can be a really positive experience. But if you've acted reactively and you've wolfed your fat food down in the moment for comfort or numbing, that's an example of where it's going to have a negative impact on you. And there are little ways in which we can spot the difference between physical and psychological hunger. So I'm going to talk through some of them just now. Physical hunger usually builds up gradually rather than coming on suddenly. And rather than being a craving for a very particular food, usually in most circumstances, pretty much any food, obviously within a range. Like we're not forcing ourselves to eat foods that we don't enjoy, but pretty much any food would satisfy that hunger. Whereas when it comes to psychological hunger, it's usually very intense. It comes on very suddenly in a lot of circumstances and is a craving for a particular food, say chocolate or pizza. And physical hunger is usually accompanied by some physical experience, like say your stomach rumbling or your energy levels dropping a little bit or your concentration dropping. Whereas psychological hunger, you wouldn't experience your stomach grumbling, you wouldn't feel that drop in energy. You wouldn't feel, you might feel a bit lethargic because of the emotion actually, but you wouldn't experience any kind of stomach pangs or anything like that. So there's some tips to help you spot the difference between the two. So take that pause, question where the urge to eat is coming from, identify whether it's physical or psychological hunger, and then make an educated decision on that rather than acting on impulse. And the reality is, if you make an educated and conscious and intentional decision to eat for comfort, say the lasagna example, you're not overeating. You're just choosing to make a comforting and nourishing meal. So it's not like say you were losing body fat to support your health. You're not sabotaging your goals. You're just making a comforting meal, and that's absolutely okay. You're not going to have, there's no net negative impact there. And even if you did decide to have a higher energy meal, it's not the end of the world. You've not failed. It's just a day where you've chosen to actually prioritize that comfort that you need in that moment. And food has just been a part of that. You've made a conscious decision about that, and fat loss has become less of a priority that day. And that's okay. Because in the grand scheme of things, if we look at long-term success and consistency over time, it's not gonna, it's gonna be a drop in the ocean. You're not gonna notice that one day. And that's not gonna have a significant impact on, your ability to achieve your goals. And sometimes actually, on the flip side of that, from a different perspective, the odd day where you choose to prioritize, other things over fat loss, I would argue could actually contribute to long-term success rather than being a hindrance. Because if you allow yourself that freedom to make those decisions and you allow yourself, time away from always being on with fat loss throughout a journey to lose body fat, if that is a goal that you have, you're more likely to be able to sustain your efforts over the long term rather than just trying to kind of force yourself into always, being on with fat loss and feeling then like you kind of need to escape it after a certain time, because that kind of mindset can lead to overeating as well. The fifth point, not eating balanced, substantial enough meals on the whole. So we spoke about how saving calories for your evenings, saving calories for your weekends can lead to overeating and contribute to that and keep people stuck in that cycle, but also not eating substantial enough meals just on the whole and dieting in an extreme manner, or just underfueling. Even if your goal is, say you have performance goals, say your goal isn't fat loss or anything along those lines, but you have performance goals and you're not eating substantial enough meals, you're underfueling, that again can lead to increased levels of physical hunger because the body needs that food, increased food focus, and really low energy levels, which also can lead to increased cravings and a drive to eat and all of that kind of thing. And again, an increased likelihood of overeating. So that's something to think about. Like I said, even if you're someone who's just looking at being the fittest, healthiest version of you, or you have performance goals in the gym, or you want to run a half marathon or a marathon, whatever it may be, it's so important to make sure that you're providing your body with regular balanced meals consistently that are, if your goal isn't losing body fat for whatever reason, that are meeting your energy demands. If your goal is fat loss, it's important to make sure that you're not in an extreme deficit, an unnecessarily large deficit. And having balanced meals in themselves. So what I mean by that is not just having, say, like a protein and some veg or fruit. Instead, having a balanced meal containing a protein, carb, and a fat source can be really, really beneficial because it can help keep us more regulated. It can help us manage our hunger levels, keep us more satiated, and support our energy levels throughout the day rather than us seeing big dips and things like that. Consuming enough fiber is also something that's really beneficial for us managing our appetite and also just being the healthiest, best functioning versions of ourselves. And the last point, point number six, is wolfing your food down and not taking a moment to enjoy your food and eat slowly. And not only is this something that increases our likelihood of overeating, but it's something that is likely to have a negative impact on things like our digestion and therefore our physical health as well. Whereas if we're to take our time with our meals, eat slowly, chew our food properly, our digestion is likely to be much better as a result of that, much more regular. And we're also, like I said, going to feel so much more satisfied after each meal. Hunger levels are going to be much more manageable, and therefore we're going to be less likely to overeat. Takes a moment for those fullness cues to kick in, when we're eating our meals. And if you're wolfing your food down like it's going to disappear, you're not going to have chance to register those hunger cues, hunger cues. So slow down, chew your food, take a breath between your bites. If you're at a social meal, a really good tip is to put your cutlery down between each couple of mouthfuls, and take your time to chew your food properly, but also engage in conversation with the people that are with you. And again, that's not only going to be beneficial for your physical health and overcoming overeating, but it's also going to help you with the quality of the connections that you have in your life. It's going to help you enhance those connections and form new ones and get the most out of really being present during social eating experiences, because nourishment goes far beyond a food's nutritional value. So, they're six really common things that people often engage in that exacerbate any overeating they're struggling with, lead to overeating, or keep them stuck in a cycle of overeating followed by restriction. So, if you can relate to any of these, first of all, you're human. It's very common. You don't need to feel bad or guilty for that. And it isn't, it's important not to, whatever your goal is, whatever journey you're on in the realms of health and fitness, it's so important to meet yourself with a bit of understanding and compassion and recognize, okay, I understand why I'm engaging in these behaviors, because on surface level, if I don't think about it too much, it makes sense when I'm trying to stop overeating. However, I can also recognize that it's not serving me and it's probably exacerbating the struggles that I'm facing. But you are capable of change, and it's just about bringing a bit more awareness to the behaviors that you're engaging in and making a conscious decision to change them moving forwards. So, if you can resonate with any of these points, if they are things that you're engaging in and you're struggling with overeating, then maybe just pick one or two to try and work on over this next week. Stay consistent with what those one or two things and see if they have a positive impact, and then go from there. Don't try and implement everything at once, because that will be really overwhelming for you and will likely lead to you feeling like you're a failure, which we do not want. So pick one or two small little things that you could start to challenge over the next week. See if they have a positive impact. If they do, talk to me about it, stay consistent with them, and then let's see if we can build on that moving forwards. If you found this episode helpful, it would mean the world if you could share it with someone else who might need to hear it, or tag me on your Instagram story and share that you're listening. Thank you so much for listening. I really, really appreciate it. And also, yesterday was our Beyond the Basics event, and it was the most incredible day. We had such a lovely group of you there. So thank you so much to everyone that came and made it so special, because it was just amazing. And we are hopefully going to be doing another one at some point further down the line, because it was such a huge success. So thank you so much if you came. If you didn't, keep your eyes peeled for the next one. Make sure you're there, because it was absolutely fantastic. And if anyone is interested, if social occasions are something that you or your clients struggle with, I'm hosting a free webinar next Thursday evening at 6 p.m. on managing social occasions. Completely free of charge. It is a one-off event. It's your only chance to get involved in something like this. So if you're interested, drop me a message on Instagram with the word webinar, and I will send you a link to register. I'll also put the link to register in the description below if anyone just wants to register straight off. But it would be amazing to have as many of you there as possible. And if you do sign up, you will receive a webinar copy as well. that will be accessible for 48 hours after the recording. But there are massive benefits to coming live because you'll be able to engage in the moment. You'll be able to ask any questions that you have. You will also get additional resources if you do come live in comparison to if you just watch the recording. So please get it in your diaries. If you can make it, it would be amazing. And I will look forward to seeing you there.